Hello and good evening. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for this evening's Twilight event, part of the Deep Tech Innovation Centre series. We have a great guest speaker with us today, Ben, who I've known for a few years, and I actually met when he was leading the Level 39 incubator for fintech businesses in Canary Wharf in London. So he has an amazing insight and perspective on the startup ecosystem and what it takes to be successful as a startup. So I'm really looking forward to hearing Ben share his pearls of wisdom with us this evening. So it's going to be a fantastic session, I'm sure. If we just quickly show the event agenda, so if we can move on to the next slide. So I'm just going to give a very brief introduction into the Deep Tech Innovation Centre, and that will just sort of cover some of the activities and the incubator that we have as part of that. I'll then hand over to Ben to share his insights for us all. Then we'll go into a Q&A session. So I would encourage everyone throughout Ben's discussion or talk, if you could post any questions that you do have, that would be very helpful, and I will curate those questions with Ben during that discussion session, and then we'll close the event out once we've gone through everyone's questions. So I'm really looking forward to the session this evening. So if we could just quickly go on to the next slide. So the Deep Tech Innovation Centre, this is part of the Warwick Innovation District, and we've set this up to help incubate and inspire innovators within our district, but it's essentially open to anyone that's got a interesting deep tech startup, and we're really focused on helping to inspire, educate and incubate those founders and to help them build sustainable businesses. This is a brand new initiative for Warwick, and we actually started our first incubation cohort 2 weeks ago. So it's very exciting. We've got our first cohort of innovation founders, and they're all with us this evening as well. So it's great to have them listening into this as well. So I'm sure they'll benefit from this session as well as everyone else on the session today. If we just go on to the next slide. So we have a whole program of events and activities as part of this. This session this evening is one of the Twilight events that we do publicly to sort of both promote the Deep Tech Innovation Centre, but also to help anyone else who is thinking about starting a business and wants to learn a little bit more, understand some of the interesting challenges and opportunities. As part of the Warwick Innovation District, we run a number of different educational programs. Some of these are for students, others are open to others as well. And as I mentioned earlier, we've just started our first cohort 2 weeks ago, and as part of that, we have a First Steps Accelerator program, which is a 9-week program as part of that 6 month incubator. So we're very excited to get started with this. If you are listening in and would like to be part of our second cohort, please reach out to me. I'll share my details later, but very happy to have follow-on conversations with anyone that's interested to join our second cohort, which will start in August. If we just go on to the next slide. So the incubator follows a standard framework that Warwick and the Innovation District have used for a number of different incubators that they've set up over the last sort of few years, and it really is based on the sort of 3 pillars of inspiration, education and incubation. So as part of the Deep Tech Innovation Centre, we're following this framework as part of what we're now deploying with our first cohort. So we're very excited with this, and you know, very keen to sort of build this capability up and to grow this over time. If we just go on to the next slide. So part of this is obviously helping innovation founders to sort of start their businesses and to grow their businesses and to explore opportunities for how they want to take their business forward. But there are many other elements to this. So it's partly around the sort of educational side of things. So for many people, learning more about what's involved in setting up a business and the different aspects of business that you need to look into is a sort of key part of what we're doing. We're also really looking to build partnerships with corporates that are looking to work with innovative companies that they may have specific business challenges that they'd like to work with us and with our startups to solve. So we're very interested in reaching out to businesses who are looking to partner with us. And of course, part of this being a Deep Tech Innovation Centre, we're also very much research focused as well. So it's very much about nurturing research from the academic side and finding opportunities to commercialise those research projects and PhDs and MSCs as well. So it's a great initiative. We are literally just started, so it's very exciting for us, and we will continue to run these monthly events. If we just go on to the next slide, I think we will be having, as I say, monthly events, the March and April events. I will be confirming those very shortly, so please watch out on the sort of LinkedIn and social media for updates on that. And as I say, feel free to connect with me and reach out to me if you are interested to learn more about what we're doing and would like to get involved in any capacity. So with that, thank you for listening for that section. I will now hand over to Ben to give us his insights on startup success.
Andy, thank you very much indeed. And ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to join you this evening. I am delighted to be with you, partly because I think that this is a great topic, and partly because 20 years ago, I was myself studying a master's and MBA at Warwick Business School. So I feel like I'm coming home, and it's a pleasure to join you. I'm going to do something a little bit different because we're here to talk about the needs of deep tech, but we're going to talk about a different way of addressing some of those needs, and particularly the need to form new relationships with potential customers, investors, regulators, policymakers, the media, people who might join your teams. In other words, we're going to try stretching beyond the internal requirements of the business to talk about the new relationships, the external bridges you may need to build. So I'm going to invite you to join me on that journey. The reason why it's me, the reason why I'm here, is that I've spent the last few years running ecosystems, and most recently at Level 39 in Canary Wharf, which is a cluster of about 200 fintech and cybersecurity companies. In that environment, a great many companies solving complex problems hidden deep inside complex global financial services institutions. So it's a very familiar experience to be developing a technology which the majority of people don't understand, even if many of us benefit from the applications and development of that technology. And I guess you could say that's one of the common features of deep tech businesses. Now, before I go any further, I'm just going to say a thank you to some of the people who I think might be joining us this evening. We had a quick look through who was here on Eventbrite, and I could see, as far as I could tell, there was a huge overrepresentation of people called Daniel. So whether that's you, Ed Daniel, or whether it's you, well, who we've got, Dan DeWolf, and we've also got, I think, a Daniel from Magic Carpet, and that caught my eye. because magiccarpet.ch, that's magic-carpet.ch, is a company who I would very much like to find out more about because of their name. Of course, we've used magic in the subtitle of this talk, and it was a pleasure to find out that here's a company which has put that into its name. Now, I mentioned that Daniel is the chief executive, and he's here this evening. Daniel's last name, I'm not even going to try to pronounce, but I hope he'll tell us how to pronounce it later. In the meantime, I'd like to ask Daniel, and indeed anyone else who's here, to see if you can find out what the UK Scrabble score for Daniel's last name will be. If you can tell me in the chat what that score is for his last name, assuming it's not on any double letters or double words, then I will be able to produce a magic carpet of my own to complement the Magic Carpet Company. So please do let us know in chat if you can do that. Now, I think it's probably worth teasing apart two aspects of deep technology: the impact that deep technology has and the engagement it has. So if we could take the first slide, please. Here is a simple plot, a way of pulling apart the impact that a technology has from its engagement with the public. And for the purposes of simplicity, I've identified impact with the brain and engagement with the heart. So please bear with me on that model of these two important considerations. So let's start off with the basics. If I could have the first click, please. This is my lunch. It's probably of no interest to the public, and it's probably of no impact either, although I can assure you it was delicious. I haven't given anything up for Lent, so I really feasted, I hope. However, that no one expects this to be of great interest to anybody else. The challenge that we so often face in deep tech, if we could have the next click, please, is that what we're doing is of great public impact, but of very little public engagement. Even if the public were to understand the technology, it might not be clear why that should matter to them. And this, in essence, is the major challenge which many deep tech innovators face. And it's this challenge which I'd like to invite you on a little journey around this graph to consider now. So this particular piece of media interest is perhaps a few weeks old now, but if we have the next click, you'll see it's a stark contrast. Here is something, the UK fishing fleet, which has commanded a huge amount of public engagement for several weeks now. This tiny part of our economy is in real terms of very, very low public impact, a small fraction of 1% of GDP, and yet has dominated much of the discussions around the Brexit process. In stark contrast, for example, to financial services, which was essentially left out of those negotiations, in part because it did not win the hearts of the public. It didn't really have a political mandate. And so I think it's worth considering, as one is developing one's deep tech business, what one can learn from fishermen and fisherwomen. Let's have the next click. Now here's an institution which has got it all. The National Health Service has dominated all of our minds, especially, of course, in the last year. But this national institution combines enormous impact with enormous engagement. And so, of course, communicators of every stripe increasingly try to express what they're doing under the umbrella of this public health agenda. And so I think it's worth considering the bracket between these two, between the high level of engagement achieved by an economically pretty marginal group, the UK fishing industry, and the high level of engagement of this great institution. Of course, relatively few companies have the means or the scale to engage people's hearts, let alone their minds, to the extent of the NHS. So let's fill the gap in between and explore what happens here. Let's look for something that's a bit lower barrier to entry. If I could have the next click, please. So here we have cake. Just as a brief aside, I did a consulting project many years ago for a technology business. The technology business helped hotels improve their ratings on TripAdvisor. It had a fairly sophisticated technological approach to this. And in a successful case, it could help one of its clients climb about 100 rankings up TripAdvisor's hotel rankings. On the sides of the project, which was largely technical, I asked the chief executive, out of interest, curiosity, what it was that took the hotel at the very top of the TripAdvisor rankings in London to that top spot, because it certainly wasn't a technical solution. And with a look of complete contempt, he said, well, you know, they're an unremarkable hotel in every respect except one. Whenever a guest arrives, they find a cake on their bedside table in their room. Now, this to me is the ultimate hack. This is a simple, traditional sugary product, which certainly engages the public. So no matter how sophisticated your technology, I think it is worth considering what a simple sugary treat can do to bring key influencers together to join your project. After all, you don't have to understand the technology to enjoy the cake. And we'll come back to why you may want to be dealing with a lot of people who don't understand what you're doing a little later. Could we have the next click, please? I thought it was worth introducing the National Lottery at this stage. It's going through transition at the moment, but here's something which has a higher degree of public impact and yet still has a very wide degree of public engagement. The two salient points I would point out are that it has a high level of public engagement because it is very simple to participate. The premise is simple and clear. The possibility of a life-changing game for a relatively small outlay with no complexity to participation. And yet, in terms of public impact, it can also make a meaningful claim to have resulted in very significant redistributions of wealth and opportunity. Some of them perhaps good, some of them perhaps less so. But certainly it's something which captures a great many people's attention, and an important feature associated with that is that it turns uncertainty, which is usually a public ill, into a public good. And a great many people have happier entertainment or happier weeks considering the possibility of a massive upside. Could we have the next click, please? And finally, perhaps squeezed in just by the NHS there, I thought it was worth highlighting the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 goals which have been promoted globally to try to draw so many of our attention together to solve globally important challenges. And if you're developing a technology which serves one of those, or more than one of those 17 Sustainable Development Goals, there is a North Star for you to point to, something which has already enjoyed huge amount of engagement and which helps to express impact in simple terms. And so I wanted to draw attention to that possibility, that destination, if you like, that you can use to help explain the value, impact, and reason for engagement of your deep tech. So thank you for joining me on that little trip around the impact engagement graph. Perhaps we could move to the next slide and consider three important questions which will help you to travel from left to right across this graph, increasing your public engagement and winning hearts as well as minds. So these are the three questions. We talked in the subtitle about mission, magic, and masses. How can you make sure your mission engages as many people as possible? How can you make sure that it excites people? And how can you make sure that as many people as possible are backing you up? So let's pick those apart in a little bit more detail. Before we do, I wanted to introduce a piece of research done by Harvey Coleman, who studied what it was that helped people enjoy pay rises and promotions within various institutions. His research was pretty stark, but most of what I have to say, I'm going to pin on it. He evaluated the factors that contributed to people's pay rises and their promotion. And the three contributory factors he evaluated were, first of all, people's performance in their role, objectively measured by their annual reports and reviews. The second variable he considered was their reputation, not quite the same, of course, what their colleagues said about them. And the third thing he considered was who even knew they existed, how many people within the organisation recognised their name, whether they knew anything about them, whether they had any sense of reputation at all. And what Coleman's research reveals is that our progression within an organization is only 10% related to our performance. It's 30% related to our reputation, and it's 60% about exposure. Now, this is a shocking insight if one considers its implications. Those of us who spend so much of our time talking about our technology, talking about our capability, are campaigning on a very, very narrow front indeed. And so I'd invite you to consider how you can instead, or rather I should say as well, because this is not an either or, this is not to suggest you neglect your deep tech speciality, but I'm going to invite you to complement it by considering how you can offer the most broad possible message. Deep tech certainly, but a broad message. And critically, if a message is to be broad, it needs to be one which is accessible to a great many people. It needs to be accessible, it needs to be appealing, and it needs to be communicable. And so in order to achieve that, it's worth conducting a little thought experiment. Just how low can you go? For many people, this is a distasteful exercise, but I'm going to invite you to consider it. While you may be developing world-class technology, you need to customize your message so it appeals to people who do not have deep technical knowledge, and critically, who do not have deep technical interest, because they may be able to help you all the same. They may be able to help you because they may be a underqualified waypoint on a critical path to a highly qualified partner, customer, investor, influencer of some kind. They may be somebody who endorses you for reasons which are not technical, but reflect their belief in you because they trust you, because they admire you, or simply because they recognize your name. And even that acknowledgement brings social proof, which can help others who do have the capability and the appetite to conduct due diligence to do so. So if you consider Coleman's insight, it's worth really stretching yourself to see how far can I go to articulate what my technology does as part of a broader mission. And I mentioned a moment ago the Sustainable Development Goals. Well, I would recommend starting there. Pick some of those 17 key and huge challenges that humanity faces and see if you can, rather than talking in ever more precise terms about what you do, frame it within those essentially predefined categories, which will enable you very quickly to demonstrate a much broader value of your proposition, what it is able to deliver at maturity and scale, rather than inviting people to zoom in and look at the particular technical detail right now. In other words, frame your mission to be popular, express it to be broad in appeal, and express it in a way which is simple to understand and buy into. When it comes to creating awareness, when it comes to encouraging more people to be interested, of course, one of the key challenges you face is that very few of us will want to listen to a lengthy technical explanation. In an era of social media and short attention spans, you're not competing necessarily with an alternative technology. You're really competing with a cat video. So this is why I mentioned magic. This is why Magic Carpet, as well as providing artificial intelligence-based insight, is inviting us to think of a transformational capability. It's inviting us to think of drama in its very name. And I would encourage everybody to apply that insight. Consider what you can do which stands out. And again, I challenge you, set the bar low. It's far more important, Coleman again, to be known about than it is to be known about as a technical expert. So think celebrity, think jazz hands, think entertain first, engage and communicate once you've earned the right to do so. And that's why I think it's worth considering a magical approach. And I mentioned the National Lottery for their use of uncertainty as an illustration of that. And I'll come back to one particular application of that in a few moments. But thirdly, the third question, how can you encourage others to want you to succeed? Well, very often the benefits of technology are not all distributed widely. And one of the key challenges I would suggest that deep technology businesses face over the coming years, against a backdrop of economic stress and, through the pandemic, increased inequality, we run a risk. We face a danger that we will be seen as technologists to be privatizing the gains while we've been socializing some of the challenges of this last year and the years to come. So I would suggest it's worth considering how you make sure that as broad a section of the population as possible understand how what you're doing will benefit them. And this is very often an area where deep tech businesses fall short. They fail effectively to communicate why anyone beyond a narrow cohort of investors, customers, and employees may gain. So I will challenge everybody to consider ways of communicating their message so that as many people as possible want that business, want those individuals to succeed. So I think if you can combine a blend of those three, if you can bring together a compelling mission, a magical approach which lights people up with perhaps a degree of surprise and uncertainty, and a sense that you're part of something that other people have a stake in, then I think you have a very, very much larger tide rising beneath you as you build a deep tech business. Briefly, if I may, just to illustrate that, one simple way to consider this, a marketing perspective, if you like, is as packaging. The technology that you're developing, while essential and necessary, for many people is like the workings inside a car. They don't necessarily want to see it or spend time understanding how it works, but they may hugely enjoy the external look and the experience of using it. So consider how you can present a simple interface. One of the things that I have been doing recently is creating a campaign called Genie Shares, which helps companies do that. It helps them to express their broader public purpose and critically use uncertainty, in this case, distribution of small amounts of equity, shares in the business, in a way which engages people who don't think they're interested in business and don't think they're interested in technology. In other words, it's absolutely about engaging with the heart before worrying about communicating all of the complex information to the head, which won't be to everybody's taste. But for those to whom it is relevant, it is vastly more effective if it is wrapped in a warm embrace of public support. So that, in a bit of a whistle-stop tour, is my strong invitation to every deep tech entrepreneur. By all means, of course, focus on developing your capability. Please, please embrace the opportunity to make it something which is broadly appealing. And we'll know when you've succeeded, when entrepreneurs and technology entrepreneurs who do so much to drive forward our economy, to bring us improved lives and capabilities, enjoy the same kind of public support as our healthcare workers. So I invite you to consider, if we get this right, there may come a day when it is you for whom people are clapping on Tuesdays or Thursdays, when it is you who people thank for the incredible value of deep tech innovation that you're creating. So from my point of view, if I may, I'm going to ask for the final slide. And I can't see it, but do we have an answer? Do we have the number for Daniel's last name?
We don't actually.
We don't?
No one's submitted a guess on that. So no, maybe we'll get some more. Maybe we'll get some people posting as we do the discussion session.
Let's do that. We'll leave it in that case. If you do have an answer for the UK Scrabble score for Daniel, Chief Executive of Magic Carpet's last name, do let me know.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ben. That was a really insightful talk, and there's definitely some interesting sound bites that I made a note of. So the first one was, you don't have to understand the technology to enjoy the cake. I think that's quite an interesting little soundbite there, which is really about how do you engage with your customers, and you don't have to share lots of detail on the technology. And I think this has to be one of the biggest challenges for deep tech founders and deep tech businesses, because obviously there's a lot of effort and a lot of work gone into building this quite often very complicated technology, and there's obviously the temptation that you want to share all the wonderful details and to highlight how marvelous this technology is. But I think, to your point, we're all having to compete with cat videos for people's attention, and we really do need to set the bar low in terms of people's understanding or willing to engage in detail, at least in those initial sort of engagements. And I think for all businesses, that sort of initial contact and the sales and marketing is really challenging. I love the idea of trying to match your mission as a business to a much bigger, more popular or grander sort of vision or mission, if you like, and sort of aligning to the sustainable goals is a great idea. And I can see a lot of businesses doing that right now, so that I see a lot of businesses talking about their sustainability, social and governance capabilities, and sort of building that out from a corporate perspective. So I think it is definitely something that lots of people are getting interested in now, especially with the environment. So I think that's wonderful. We've got we've got one guess at the Daniel score. So someone's saying it's 17. So I don't know, Ben, whether you've worked that out and whether that's correct, but we've got one guess on that. We also have a question as well from the audience, which I'll sort of share with you. So it's sort of a great session so far, so thank you for that. Just curious on how can a startup or small business approach external companies, institutions for support without having a stable financial situation, especially during COVID. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Ben.
Well, I think first of all I should acknowledge that 17 is the correct amount. So as you can see, the magic carpet is off. I think, of course, this is not easy to do. It isn't easy to build complex webs of relationships with big institutions when you're an early stage company. This is the essential challenge, especially of B2B businesses. How do you embrace huge complex institutions? And certainly at level 39, surrounded by small businesses selling into global financial services firms, there's the added complexity of regulation, for example. There are huge technical debt issues. There are all sorts of reasons why this is irreducibly difficult. And so I'd suggest that you can think of the approach I'm sort of proposing as one which doesn't seek to necessarily remove the critical issues that you need to get across when you build those key client relationships. It's to do something else. The problem with a direct approach to a prospect client is that it almost certainly invites a binary outcome. So you approach somebody directly. Would you be interested in a partnership? Can I sell you my product? Will you invest in my business? The default response will be no. And you have just that one opportunity to try to convert it into a yes. And so many of us spend so much of our time trying to perfect our pitch, trying to get a really succinct soundbite, which we can deliver to somebody before they get hungry or need to go for a walk. We try to do this in an environment where we're competing for their attention with a dozen other startups. And it's an immensely high bar to set, even if they are in the mood to buy, even if they're in the mood to invest. So I'm going to invite you to consider a complementary approach, which is to win their heart with this kind of relatively low-tech approach, by sharing your values, your purpose, by articulating a compelling mission, by winning the support of the people around them, not the specialists, but the generalists, the population, so that when they come to look for a particular capability, they come to you, and they come to you because they've heard about you from third parties. So a key element of this is referral. And that's where non-technical specialists are your secret weapon. They don't need to know every detail. That'll come out in the due diligence, but they need to know enough to remind people of your existence when there is an opportunity to buy or to invest. So it's a long game, I'm afraid. There is no shortcut here, but certainly the best predictive indicator I saw in level 39 of organizations beginning their growth ramp was when they started being mentioned in third-party conversations. And this is a key point. It didn't really matter what was being said about them. It didn't need to be rich content with detailed technical information. They simply needed to show up as a node in a referral network. And the more someone's name is mentioned, back to Coleman again, the more likely they are to succeed.
That's great, and I think the Coleman analysis is actually, when I found out about that, and someone told me that when during my career in financial services, and it was actually very shocking to realise that only 10% of my actual performance is relevant to how successful I am as an individual. And it's all about letting people, as you say, it's all about people talking about you and referencing you and say, oh, you want to talk to Andy if you want to know about this or talk about that. And I think the other thing that we're trying to stress with our first cohort with the First Steps Accelerator program is building your network and always asking for referrals. And the key to this as well, I think that it's quite important, is you never know who's going to refer you to a potential customer. So it might be your accountant, it might be just a friend, it could be all sorts of places, and it's all about building that really strong network. And I think that the sort of ecosystem and that network is really important. But I think, to your point, Ben, it's about making sure people understand what you do in a very simple way that's easy for people to communicate and share, because if it gets too complicated, people just won't transfer that very well. So I think that's a sort of key area to sort of focus on. I just wanted to sort of pick up a little bit on your experience with level 39 and the fintech particularly. So we covered this a little bit in our last talk about sort of much smaller businesses trying to work with the larger potential clients. I was wondering if you had any pearls of wisdom around those challenges, because obviously any sort of startup company is going to be looking to work with clients that are obviously slightly more established and sort of bigger than them. Do you see any challenges there, and how do you think that deep tech startups should sort of deal with that?
Well, certainly it is challenging, and one of the I mentioned one of the rules of thumb, which seemed to be a good predictive indicator of people on the path to success, was that they be appearing in third-party conversations. The key pearl of wisdom I have is closely related to that. the reason they were turning up in third-party conversations was that they were collaborating with potential rivals. Very often an entrepreneur will be much more sensitive to the rivalries of people who are developing closely related technologies or capabilities, and may not notice that from the point of view of a potential customer, the distinctions are far finer than they feel to you. Now, it doesn't quite follow directly from that, but it comes close. That especially when you're selling in a complex selling environment, where particularly when the customer is uncertain of what you're doing and how to evaluate it, how to establish trust, how frankly to conduct their due diligence, it reassures them enormously if they can see you alongside your competitors. And the reason for that is, again, relatively simple. It's the same reason why you often get groups of second-hand car dealers clustering together around the margins of cities, because people are much more likely to buy if they can compare offers relatively close to each other. And if they go to one dealer and say, why shouldn't I buy the car on that forecourt? And that dealer gives them an expert but detached view, that's much more credible than a direct approach or a direct ask. And so it's a much smarter move, in other words, to hang out with and collaborate with your competitors. The net effect in a cluster like Level 39 is that you won't win out on every deal, but the deals you do win out on will be those for which you are competitively best placed, which means you learn from your competitors as well as your customers. Average sales times reduce, which is critical, because when you're selling into regulated financial services, the average sales time is 18 months. And that's just too much for most small businesses. So collaborative sales significantly improve the odds of success for a whole cohort of organizations. And it is far better to forego one sale to a competitor who is better placed to serve a client, knowing that you can always collaborate with them and you may indeed enter their supply chain, but they will also be able to refer business to you. And so your cost of competition will actually fall, your sales cycle will shorten.
Yes, that's really interesting, isn't it, in terms of the ecosystem where potentially what you might consider to be a competitor could also be a partner, and you may find a space in which you can collaborate together and support each other. So that's an interesting one. One other question I've got for you, which is around the sort of looking at sort of having that broader mission, is have you seen companies over their sort of growth journey change their mission and adapt that for maybe different market sectors or for different sizes of businesses? Have you seen that happen before?
Well, I guess the way in which one expresses it does change. And of course, it's important to have a mission which is published and which you share with your team and your investors and so on. I guess that doesn't have to be the same as the broad public, perhaps rather simpler messages you may want to convey. So I highlighted the value of the Sustainable Development Goals in this respect. They're a template to work to. They're already there, and they're already well established in much of the world's consciousness. And so often it seems that when people will spend time focusing on a mission to describe what makes them different, they will use mission as a way to differentiate. And especially in the formative stages of a business, that may feel very important. But if what you're really doing is you're saying, here we are alone in the world doing something which we consider important, but no one else has quite yet understood just how important it is, you're actually pushing people away. And so it seems to me there are really two types of organizations, and perhaps even two types of entrepreneurial personality. Perhaps the majority start off like that, and they say, okay, how can we tell the world how different we are, how disruptive we are, how we're going to, replace out with the old, in with us. And then there are those who take the different view, which is to say, where is the really important problem that we're solving? And how do people choose to express how much they care about it? because that's where we want to go. And we want all of the people already heading there to join us and see us as part of the movement and then sweep us along in that collective effort.
Wow, yeah, that's really interesting. I like that. I like sort of how you've grouped that into two sort of schools of thought, if you like, and yeah, that's very interesting. So Ben, I wanted to thank you very much for your talk and for your insights. It's been amazing, and so many useful tools and sort of a framework, in fact, to sort of help how deep tech startups can better communicate to their broader environment. I think that's really, really important, and I'm sure not only our current cohort, but everyone on the call and others that will watch on replay will really benefit from those key sort of learnings, if you like. So thank you very much for your time. It's been fantastic to get your insights and some amazing visuals that you had there, and I still haven't figured out how you're doing all of these things, but absolutely amazing, and the sort of little genie there behind you, so fantastic. So thank you for being super entertaining, Ben, and very informative as well. So and if we can just go on to the last slide. So again, if anyone's interested to learn more about the Deep Tech Innovation Centre, to get involved either as an innovation founder, as a corporate that would like to be part of our partnership and sponsorship sort of ecosystem, and for anyone that would like to support in other ways, please reach out to me. You can connect with me on LinkedIn or drop me an email. Very happy to have a follow-up conversation with anyone that's interested to learn more. But thank you all for joining, and been another great session, and I'll let you know when our next events are scheduled through the usual social media channels. So thank you all for your time, and thank you again, Ben, for a fantastic talk and for sharing your wonderful insights. So thank you all.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.